The pads came out at the VMAC today. It's a holiday for all football players and coaches. How did things go down with the pads finally returning for the first time in nearly 8 months? I'm going to be breaking down day 5 of Seahawks training camp coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, whether you're in nearby Newcastle, Washington, or Towanda, Pennsylvania. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks back in action today after having Sunday off, and this was the first padded practice of the 2025 season, a unofficial holiday for football players, coaches, and fans. Feeling a lot closer to what we're going to see in week 1 when the 49ers come to Lumen Field. I'll be diving into all the key takeaways from today's practice, including Damien Martinez stepping up with the pads on, Kenny McIntosh being out. Had a really impressive day. We'll be breaking down a number of offensive takeaways. Going to start on the defensive side of the football first, though. This jam-packed episode is brought your way by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now for our lead story here on your Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. As Mike McDonald and Cooper Kupp said after practice concluded, the arrival of pads is always an unofficial holiday at every level of football, not just in the NFL, whether you're talking peewee leaguers, high school, middle school, college. The chance to move away from the non-padded practices, non-contact, and then start hitting, that is the day that every football player relishes. And thankfully for the Seahawks, 5th training camp practice was today at the VMAC, and that means that they had reached their minimum number of non-padded practices that they could have before they could bust the pads out. Got the pads going, got the hitting going some. Not live bringing guys to the ground yet, but the closest we've gotten to this point. And certainly this was a practice that was won by the defensive side of the football. And obviously Mike McDonald, he's going to always lean defensive anyway, but nonetheless, if there was anything that you could take away from the end of this practice and his post-practice comments, he clearly was not happy with the way the run game on offense was. He thought his defense played really well, made it tough on the offense, but he did not see the physicality. He did not see the effectiveness running the football that he desires from Seattle's offense with the new coaching staff in place. So you can look at that as a negative takeaway here, but I want to start with the defense and just kind of honing in on who shined today. And we've got to start with Nick Emmanwori, the 2nd-round pick out of South Carolina, who first couple of days of camp, he was pretty much playing all of his snaps with the 2nd and 3rd team defense. And while he's still getting some action with those units, the last couple of practice, he's been gradually starting to be sprinkled in with the 1st team defense. A lot of snaps with Julian Love and Kobe Bryant, 3 safeties on the field. His big play today, the first splash play that he's made in training camp, came with the 2nd team defense. So you can put that as a caveat. He was going against a fellow rookie in Jalen Milroe and a 3rd string offense. Still, nonetheless, Jalen Milroe's had a really good camp to this point, and this was the first time he really got burned. And Emmanwori, it showed how difficult it is to get a football over the top of this 6'3", 220-pound safety, because initially I was watching this doing an interview with KJR, and initially it did look like Brady Russell, the tight end, was open. And so Jalen Milroe tried to loft it over to him. And next thing you know, here comes this giant safety wearing number 3 in Nick Emmanwori that reaches up, plucks the ball in the air, and then runs the ball back like he's carrying a loaf of bread. McDonald was joking he didn't want to see that at the end of practice. Nonetheless, he takes it back for the touchdown. So the first real splash play that we've seen from Nick Emmanwori, and it got the entire crowd going on the berm, teammates all over him. If he continues to make plays like that, everything that the Seahawks are throwing at him, he seems to be handling. And so they aren't trying to overdo it. They're not trying to overwork him, but he just seems to continue to handle everything that's being thrown his direction. He's learning the defense. He's figuring things out. He's constantly in the office for Mike McDonald asking about things. And now that is starting to show up in the field with all the physical tools that he has. So a big play, the play of the day coming from Nick Emmanwori. At least that was the play of the day in the team session. For me personally, the moment of the day came during one-on-ones. And I will admit, this is what I look forward to the most as a reporter when the pads come out. It isn't the team sessions. It is the opportunity to finally see offensive and defensive linemen go full bore against each other, blocking, trying to get off blocks, and no more of the patty cake that we've seen for the last couple months because of the rules. Now they can play real football in the trenches, and particularly the one-on-ones, a real good opportunity to just put a guy on an island, see if he can block the defender. And great first test for somebody like Gray Zabel. It's an opportunity for some of these defensive players to shine. In particular, though, this, like I said, this was the moment of the day for me. It takes a lot for my jaw to drop at an NFL training camp practice because I've seen so many incredible things. But DeMarcus Lawrence going up against Abraham Lucas. And Abe Lucas is 6'6", 325 pounds, incredibly powerful guy. This was not something I anticipated seeing, even though I know that DeMarcus Lawrence is very strong for his size. Lawrence shot off the ball. He was going against Lucas in one-on-ones, shot off the ball, and bull rushed Abe Lucas to the point where he came fully off the ground. Both of his feet were almost a foot off the ground. That is how powerful DeMarcus Lawrence is. And he drove Lucas back once he got to the ground, or his feet back to the ground, drove him back quickly into the pocket. It was one of those plays where every guy standing over there looked like their jaw was dropping. It was a remarkable feat. And then he came back to the next rep, and even though he didn't get Lucas off the ground this time, he still dominated him, drove him back into the pocket. And you just don't see people do that to Abraham Lucas. And that shows you the old man strength that DeMarcus Lawrence brings to the equation. So D-Law was setting the law today in one-on-ones, and you can see why my co-host Rob Rang, normally here with me on Mondays, why he has said DeMarcus Lawrence is one of the very best practice players that he's ever watched, dating back to all those times that he watched him with the Dallas Cowboys in camp. You can see that now in Seattle with the drills, how he performs in those drills and what he's doing in these one-on-one instances. Had a couple plays in the team segment where he was making things happen to the line of scrimmage. He is a ton of fun to watch. As far as a couple other things that stood out to me today from this practice on the defensive side of the football, Leonard Williams, that is one heck of a draw for Gray Zabel in his first one-on-one session. And in the first rep, it was all big cat. Bull rushed Zabel, knocked him back onto his heels, and then swam past him very quickly, got to the coach that was playing the quarterback position. But this was the most encouraging thing that I saw all day in terms of somebody that got whipped on one snap and then came back and responded. Zabel, literally about 20 seconds later, these reps are always rapid fire. 20 seconds later, going against Big Cat, again gets the bull rush, and it looks like he's going to lose again. But he hunkered down, he anchored, and Leonard Williams tried to spin back inside, and you could see the athleticism for Gray Zabel. He mirrored really well, and he just shut down number 99. So he won that rep. It was a 50-50 battle against Leonard Williams for a rookie. I don't care if you're a first rounder, seventh rounder, whatever, a rookie doing that. That was incredibly impressive for me. And the other thing that I loved watching about this, after those two reps, a couple minutes later, Gray Zabel came over to Leonard Williams. They were off to the side, came over, and Leonard Williams was taking the time to go through some tips with him on how to handle that first swim move off the bull rush combo. That is the kind of stuff that you love to see. Yes, these guys are going to compete their tails off against each other. They are going to play to win every single rep they have. But at the end of the day, they're teammates. These guys want to make themselves and their teammates better. And seeing Big Cat do that, I thought was really impressive. It was quite a statement that, yeah, I just whipped you with this, but I'm going to show you some tips, and we'll see if those tips help you. And maybe I'll pull something else out to end up winning again. That makes everyone better. So I thought that was certainly exciting. And I'll talk about this later in the show. Tyrice Knight, number 48. I got a bunch of notes on him from today's practice that kind of are culminating things that we've seen up to this point. Ernest Jones was not out there for personal reasons today, so the spotlight was on number 48. I'll dive into some of the stuff I specifically saw from Tyrice Knight here on today's practice. Coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, Rob and I are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years and love how smooth the draft day experience is. Our Locked On leagues been running through Yahoo for a while now. Easy setup, great mobile app, and the smack talk just hits different in the message boards, especially when I'm rubbing it in Rob or Nick's face after a victory. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The first padded practice going down today at the VMAC. We get to see some hitting for once. No more of the non-contact rules, getting after each other in the trenches. We get to see one-on-one pass pro with running backs and linebackers. Running backs get to bounce around a little bit off tackles. Not the full real experience you're going to see in a game day setting, but nonetheless, this is a massive step forward for the players as they head towards week 1 against the San Francisco 49ers. I talked about the defense first because I felt like the defense won this practice, and Mike Macdonald echoed that sentiment afterwards. It felt like this was a dominant defensive outing this afternoon. Whether it was Nick Emmanwori's interception, Reek Woolen getting a pick on Sam Darnold in 7-on-7, some of the big plays that were made in the team period on the defensive side of the football as well, really was a defensive-dominated afternoon. With that said, there's still plenty of positives to talk about on the offensive side of the football, and we're going to be leaning into this first one off the expected bad news. Kenny McIntosh, I was not at Saturday's practice, unfortunately, so I can't tell you exactly what happened on this particular play. A lot of the reporters did not see it. They were at another spot on the practice field, did not see the injury. It was on a special teams drill. Kenny McIntosh tears his ACL, and he is done for the season. Mike Macdonald confirming afterwards that he's going to need surgery here in the near future. So his season is done before it even gets started. And that's a big hit for Seattle's running back group, even though they've got a lot of depth and a lot of talent there. This is a position that injuries can take a toll very quickly, and losing McIntosh for the entire season, that's a big blow. With that being said, as it's always the case, it's next man up, and Damien Martinez, the rookie out of Miami, formerly of Oregon State as well, before transferring, so he's got some Pacific Northwest ties, coming to Seattle. This was the golden opportunity for Damien Martinez, and this is the kind of guy that you are not going to be able to evaluate very much in non-padded practices. There's some running backs like Ken Walker III where you can see the juice, the jitterbug capability, and it blows you away in those practices. Damien Martinez just kind of looked like a guy to an extent in the non-padded practices a lot of the time because you don't get to see what he can do with his 217-pound frame. You don't get to see his contact balance and all the things he brings to the table that are only going to show up in actual football elements. And we just haven't seen much of that to this point. I thought Damien Martinez had a fantastic day, as did Mike Macdonald. He unprompted brought him up today and talked about how this was a player they anticipated was going to step up with the pads on. Again, I just think that his physical playing style, you're not going to see that really in the non-padded practices. But what I was most impressed by, and I posted this on my social media accounts, you can see a couple clips of those one-on-ones against the linebackers. I would say Damien Martinez had as good of a pass protection blitz pickup period as I have seen by a Seattle Seahawks running back in my 9 years on the beat. I've seen Chris Carson dominate back there. I thought George Halani had some really good sessions last year in pass pro, but this may have been the best I have seen. Every single rep won handily, and got to see Kennedy Palomalu getting excited, which look, normally he doesn't get excited unless he's upset about something most of the time. That's just not how he does things. He's really a calm, cool, collected coach most of the time. But he was getting really fired up, and for good reason, because you could see Martinez was out there. He was using sticky hands that were in great placement, and he was chopping his feet. His feet never stopped moving. So when guys tried to make moves, counters against him, he mirrored them, and he physically dominated them. He got up to his midway point, and he was able to set the tone. I just thought it was an incredibly impressive performance in those pass protection drills. He also had a 34-yard catch and run during the team session. So you're seeing what Damien Martinez could do. There were some nice runs sprinkled in there. Again, until guys can actually tackle him, you're not going to fully see what this guy's capable of doing from a physicality standpoint. But today you got a sense of that contact balance. You saw the really impressive pass protection and the catch and run. That is maybe the weakest part in his game for me coming into the NFL, at least consistency-wise. If they can get consistent production out of him as a receiver, and he can pass protect like he did today, or even close to that, he has a chance to be a real surprise as a third down back for the Seahawks, because I wasn't sure that he had the skill set necessarily to do that. Thought of him more as an early down guy. He might be out there to prove people wrong. If he can do what he did today, there's got to be consistency, but there was a lot to be excited about there on that front. As for a few other things that jumped out to me today, Elijah Arroyo, look, it's another day, another dominant practice for him. I have not seen a single football hit the ground in training camp that has been thrown to 18, whether it is in just their on-air drills, if it's in team drills, 7-on-7. If the ball is going to Elijah Arroyo, he is catching it. So both Miami draft picks doing really fun things today on the field, and they were getting the job done with the first and second team offenses. So I think Arroyo, this is just becoming more clear why Seattle decided to do what they did with Noah Fant right before the start of camp. They feel like Arroyo is ready for that opportunity to be one of the top pass catchers in this offense. He's so smooth in and out of his breaks. He can stretch the field, and his hands, that's the thing that is most impressive. The guy had one drop in his entire college career. That is carried over. He actually had a few drops in OTAs, so I was really shocked by that. But now that he's gotten more comfortable in this offense and with his new quarterbacks, if the ball is anywhere in the zip code for him, he is finding ways to make those plays. So I've been really impressed by that. As for the offensive line, the deeper we get into this training camp, I don't know that Jalen Sundell wins a starting job for this team, but it does feel like John Benton, Rick Dennison, all of the coaches that are involved in this process, they are at least very interested in seeing whether Jalen Sundell can win a job. They are giving him a lot of opportunities today. He got more right guard reps to the first team than what Christian Haynes did. Now, that might just be a case where they're alternating days. Maybe Haynes gets most of those reps tomorrow. We'll have to wait and see. But Christian Haynes is also getting more reps by day at the center position, and his snapping is getting much better. He's looking more comfortable in that regard. So I think that this could be a case where the Seahawks really want Jalen Sundell because of that athletic profile that he brings to the equation. He's as athletic as any offensive lineman the Seahawks have on their roster. And in this zone blocking scheme, particularly the wide zone, that is incredibly valuable. It looks like they are trying to find a way that they can get Jalen Sundell into the lineup. And I think he's had a pretty good camp so far. I thought he had a couple nice reps in the one-on-ones. He got beat on one of those as well. But this is a great opportunity for the second-year player. The Seahawks, they are keeping things wide open right now. At some point, they're going to have to start figuring out who's going to be the guy. And you don't want this to bleed all the way up to week one or further than that, like he did last year with Christian Haynes and Anthony Bradford at the right guard spot. But this is starting to feel like it's between Haynes and Sundell for that right guard position. And maybe Bradford plays back into it. But to this point in camp, I've seen a lot of second-team reps, and I'm just not sure that he's necessarily in the mix now for that. I'm more positive that Christian Haynes could potentially shoot up the board at the center position than I am Anthony Bradford is going to be starting at right guard at this point, because it does feel like this is a two-horse race with Haynes and Sundell. And if Sundell gets that job, Seattle may very well think that upside-wise, Christian Haynes has a higher ceiling at the center position than what Oluwatimi does. So you got a lot of moving parts here, and that continues to be the position group to watch in this training camp. And last but not least, the one negative from today. Mike Macdonald, he is as blunt as they come sometimes, and he was asked if he felt the presence of Abraham Lucas and Robbie Oots on the field on offense, and he said, honestly, no. And it wasn't necessarily taking a shot at those two guys, but he just wasn't happy with the way that the offense played, particularly the run game. He thought they started slower than the defense did. So he was challenging that offense with a couple of his answers that he had in the press conference. There was those out in the air, open air responses. Hey, offense, tomorrow's got to be your day. You've got to step up, particularly with the run game, and start to play with the physicality and effectiveness that we need to be able to play the type of football that we want to play. And as he said, this tends to have ebbs and flows in training camp. Defense wins one day, offense wins the next. He's hoping the offense is going to find a way to do that tomorrow. At the same time, behind the scenes, he's challenging his defense. Hey, make them have struggles again. Let's continue to dominate here in these practices. So the offense, the challenge has been posted to them. They need to go out tomorrow with the pads day 2, and they need to bring it. The offense needs to get things going, particularly the run game, and improve upon today. I saw some decent runs. I also saw a lot of them that got stonewalled quickly by the defense. And I think that's what Mike Macdonald's hinting at. He wants to see more consistency in terms of push and getting running room for his running backs in these team drills. So that's going to be the big negative from today, that his offensive coaching staff, his players, they are going to have to figure out tomorrow and see if they can come out and adapt to what was done today and have a much better practice on that front. When I come back, everybody's been talking Ernest Jones this offseason, and rightfully so. Had a great 10 games with the Seahawks after coming over from the Titans. But there's another linebacker on this roster that should not be overlooked. I had a chance to chat with Tyrice Knight. I'm going to dive into some things I've observed from the second-year linebacker on the practice field so far, and going to share a few segments from my interview with him at the VMAC. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with your friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices in the app actually drop the closer you get to the first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easier to browse the app for exciting upcoming MLB games. We've got some home games coming up for the Mariners against the Texas Rangers, and those are going to be massive in the playoff race. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDINNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. In the center of the Seahawks defense, this time last year, there were question marks, both short and long term, for Mike Macdonald's defense. The Seahawks had just signed Jerome Baker and Tyrell Dodson to one-year deals, prove-it contracts, and though both these guys had started a fair amount of games in the NFL, there was skepticism. What are these guys going to be able to be the starters beyond 2025? Well, as it turned out, they weren't going to be the starters for the entirety of 2025. Jerome Baker was traded for Ernest Jones in a deal with the Tennessee Titans before the trade deadline, and Tyrell Dodson was cut during the bye week in Week 10. The Seahawks had moved on by both of their starting linebackers from Week 1 before Week 12 of the season, and that put the onus on Tyrice Knight, a fourth rounder out of UTEP, to step in the lineup, get thrown into the fire, and not be a rookie anymore, as Mike Macdonald liked to say. And sure enough, he really didn't play like a rookie last year in 9 starts, had almost 90 tackles, 88 on the season, had 1.5 sacks, 10 pressures on 37 blitz attempts, so he was incredibly efficient with his blitzing opportunities, had a couple pass breakups in coverage, and Seahawks with him and Ernest Jones at linebacker together, that was a dynamic group. The Seahawks finished with a top 5 scoring defense in the games those two started together last year, and I don't think that's a coincidence. These guys were playing at a much higher level, and they just fit better what Mike McDonald wanted from his inside linebackers. I don't think Tyrell Dodson or Jerome Baker are bad football players. I just don't think that this was the right scheme for either one of them. Ernest Jones and Tyrice Knight much better fit what McDonald wants at that position, and those two really thrived playing together. And there's been a lot of talk about Jones with his new 3-year contract, not a lot of discussion about Tyrice Knight. And I'm telling you right now, I'm imploring you, those of you that are listening, to not overlook number 48. I think Tyrice Knight has a chance to be one of the biggest surprises for the Seahawks this year. And some might say, well, wasn't he a surprise last year? Absolutely. But, I think we're looking from a standpoint of surprising is what he does as a starter, because he is going into this season as one of the 2 starters inside linebacker. There's heightened expectations. But when I talk to the player, and it's evident on the practice field, seeing what he's doing out there and just how much more comfortable he is, how much quicker he is to the football, his instincts have been sharpened up. He looks like a different player out there, whether he's dominating in the one-on-ones against running backs. Nobody was able to block him. I wish him and Damien Martinez would have had a rep against each other today, but that didn't pan out. Maybe next time we'll see those two together. But nonetheless, got to see Tyrice Knight make a number of plays, and he just looks much different in year 2, a much more polished linebacker now that he's had another full off season to look back at how things went last season. And he's really been able to delve into this defense. I've got high expectations for him, but the player himself might have even higher expectations. Check out my interview, chunk of the interview from the VMAC here at training camp.
How was your off season, man?
All right, but off season was good. I went back down to Miami as a trainer at Barbarito. That's why I was at for my pre-draft process, and I enjoyed everything down over the training, the rehab part. So I feel pretty comfortable going back down there.
How's it been having a full NFL offseason? I know last year you were like all the other rookies. You're going through the pre-draft process, trying to train before the draft, and then you just get thrown into OTAs. But now you get this entire full offseason to prepare for year 2.
It's been great, just full offseason, just helping me out with the playbook, just being around my teammates more, and just being inside the weight room on the field. All the guys just gave me pretty much prepared for my second year, I think this full offseason is getting ready for the upcoming season.
You got a lot of action last year, especially second half. You get to start with Ernest. What's it been like building that relationship with him, coming over from Tennessee, and now you guys get to potentially play the next several years together as the middle of this defense?
When you got here last year, even before we started playing, really first day here, I felt like we had a connection that got beyond the field, and just we started playing together, just kept building. Honestly, the point we're at right now, I don't think our relationship can get any further than we're at right now. They're kind of like my brother. We talk about everything with each other, from family to football. He's a really good guy. I feel like he's a great vet to have in front of me, because he's going to teach me the right way to go.
You look at the way that things went last year, all the experience that you gained, kind of getting thrown in the fire early in the year, then you start the last 8 or 9 games that you were in the starting lineup. When you went back and watched the film, what jumped out to you as far as areas that you were happy about and areas you're like, hey, this is what I attack this offseason. This is where I get better?
Well, for sure, the areas that I love watching just off last year, just my tackling. I just know regardless of where I'm at, the tackling going to be there. I always said tackling just hard. You need to practice every day, but it's just if you got it or you don't. And just areas I need to improve on, honestly, just getting the game back slowed down how it was for my last year of college. I really just got to study film more to get back comfortable with my defense, knowing my hook at, so I can be able to play fast so I don't have to play.
Where's your comfort level at now in this defense? There's a lot of guys that I've talked to here the past few days that were here last year. They were just saying just how night and day that it was for them. But I imagine being a second-year player, especially with all the things that had to go on in the offseason for the draft, that this camp here, this first 3 days, has had to feel quite a bit different to you than what it did this time.
Oh, yeah, I've been feeling the night and day different really since OTAs and before we left in the summer. Just everything just felt way more comfortable just being on the field. Probably last year, a couple plays, I get to play here and there. I'm probably thinking the most precinct out, wondering what I'm going to do. But right now, once I get the call, I know what my assignment, know my locations, and know what I got to do to make the play. It's just going to improve every day. I just can't wait to see where I'm going to be at September 7th.
Was there anything that stood out to you last year once you got into game action? Was there anything, obviously expected to ramp up in competition, but was there anything that really surprised you as far as when you're out there like, whoa, that was different than I expected it was going to be? I know a lot of linebackers I've talked to have talked about the coverage aspect and just dealing with the speed of the receivers, running backs, tight ends that you have to cover, things like that.
Sure, everybody goes faster from the quarterback to the receiver, but honestly what stood out to me is just how more athletic the old lineman is. Right now they're coming to you way faster, so you're not really creasing out because you know what's going on. One false step or just one not going with the false height, you cut off from the play instantly. So I just knew instantly, like, if I wasn't on my game, I wouldn't be able to make the tackles I was able to make.
What are your goals for this team this year? Obviously, last 9 or 10 games, you guys are in the top 5 in scoring defense. But what is the expectation for this group? Having so many guys back, almost every player from last year's team being back this year. But what are the expectations that you've got set for this unit?
Personal team-wise?
Both. You can both. Yeah.
So team-wise, defense, we pretty much saw how we were playing the last 9 games. We didn't know what to expect. Once everybody started clicking, we knew nobody can mess up. Of course, everybody had some plays that they can get back, but it's a football that got to happen. You got to make sure they're not more than often. But just me, personal-wise, I got a lot of goals set for myself from the highest standpoint. And, I just feel like if I ain't Pro Bowl or at least All-Pro, I feel like this year will be a failure for me. I just know it's up to me to achieve that. And if I keep going and improving how I'm in right now, I'm going to reach my goals without a doubt.
And I'm going to wrap up here with a question that a few of my listeners on my podcast asked. Have you and Ernest come up with a nickname yet for your guys' linebacking corps? Or is that something that's in progress?
Nah, honestly, ask me that again probably tomorrow in a couple days. I'll probably try to have it.
You guys are on the verge of it. Okay, yeah, perfect.
We're like twins, but we can come up with a good nickname. We got a little handshake.
I'll make sure after practice to bother you about that a few times.
Oh, yeah, I got you. I'll make sure I give him a day first. That nickname will be smooth.
Yeah, I've been picking on those guys since the interview. I'm still waiting to learn what that nickname is going to be, but I promised 12s once Tyrice Knight and Ernest Jones have come up with that, I will let you know. Anyway, as always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure you don't miss a single episode. On tomorrow's show, day 6 of training camp, day 2 with pads on. As always, I will dive into all of the in-depth takeaways. And then I've got my latest interview with offensive lineman Christian Haynes from the VMAC. Make sure that you listen in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.